flags in the air. Boogity, boogity, boogity. Let's go racing, boys.
All right, Ad. We are back for the breakdown now, part of the podcast over here, Breaking Balls. And, NASCAR preview, we're, I believe, 2 weeks out from the Clash, my friend. And that means that silly season kind of wrapped up. Everyone's got their drivers kind of filled in here. And now it's time to break down some of the teams here. So without further ado, my friend, let's get into the breakdown. Where are we starting here?
Well, I mean, when you think of NASCAR teams and you think of success in the Cup Series, you think of teams like, of course, Rick Ware Racing, Bob, and that's exactly where we're going to – I'm just kidding. We're not going to start with Rick Ware. But, Bob, I think it is important because we are going to come out. A lot of people will ignore some of the smaller teams, but we're going to talk a little bit about them. The Rick Wares of the world, the Spire Motorsports. We're stacking pennies over here at Breaking Balls, and we wanted to give these guys a little bit of love. So, Bob, go ahead. Give me one driver, not from a major team, that you are interested in kind of seeing if they can take a step this year towards maybe either a more successful team or maybe improving the team that they're on.
Yeah, I'm going to cheat here. I'm actually going to pick a team just because Live Fast Motorsports, the BJ McLeod kind of, whoever's in that seat. I am actually interested to see one thing about that team before we get into kind of the meat of the bones here. They are switching from Ford and that SHR Alliance to the Trackhouse RCR. So they're going to be Team Chevy, I believe. So that's going to be something that's interesting to watch here. Another Chevy team. That, Trackhouse RCR engine was very powerful last year. We actually kind of mentioned that in the Eric Jones podcast when he went to Darlington, where I think we did the math here. It was, 8 or 9 wins that those RCR engines were powered by last year. So, Live Fast Motorsports, obviously we're not going to say they're in contention for anything this year, but, moving to that alliance, it just shows that they are serious about competing moving forward. Some of these charters, like Rick Ware and, Spire, their competitiveness is questioned at times. So this is, at least encouraging to see that Live Fast is kind of, moving to RCR engines there.
Bob, I love that answer because it definitely wasn't one I was expecting. But here's one that you probably will be able to see coming from me. Classic team, a lot of tradition. It's the Gold 21. It's Wood Brothers Racing. Harrison Burton coming off of his rookie year. Some would say it was disappointing considering the dominance in the lower series and the expectations were really high for him. But I think going into this year, everybody knows what he is now. We're not wondering what it would look like. We've seen what Harrison Burton driving this 21 car looks like. I'm anxious to see going into this year if he settles in, as he's gained a little more seat time, gotten comfortable, kind of learned how to race. We talked a lot about that last year, about how guys need to learn how to race at the Cup level. And I think Harrison Burton was kind of the biggest victim of that last year. And I'm very interested to see if he'll be able to kind of put some things together and find the success that he's had at just about every other level of racing. But kind of an underwhelming rookie year. So just anxious to watch that Gold 21 go around the track, see if he can't make a little bit of noise this year, Bob. That's my pick.
No, that's interesting that you say that because, that Wood Brothers car, kind of an alliance with Penske there. It's almost a fourth car for them. So, there should be some competitive, racing in that car, whether you're not leading the pack. I'm not saying, you're going to be a playoff driver, but you should be competitive. You should be in that top 20 to 25 range. So a big year for Harrison, being that young. I mean, you're thrown into the wolves, man. There's little time to get prepped for that. So, 1 year of experience already, that's so valuable, I would imagine, there for him.
I mean, and not to mention, Bob, you kind of have to think about it because the natural comparison there is Ty Gibbs. And Ty Gibbs won a championship last year because it's one of those things. It's names that they both have very recognizable names in the sport. Obviously, they're not necessarily the same caliber driver, but at the end of the day, just to have Ty Gibbs have that much success early is not helping Harrison Burton, in my opinion. So, be interested to see if he can't recover and kind of make a name for himself this year a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. It's one of those development cases where rushing a driver too early. I don't want to see another example of that, but another year like last year, it could be trending more toward that because that's a competitive seat that a lot of drivers are going to want, and Ford's development seat really moving forward in the Cup is kind of around that 21 car, at least in the Penske side. So another team that we'll touch on before we kind of get into the meat of the bones here with I don't even think we mentioned at the beginning. I think we're going to do Legacy, RFK, Kaulig, and Front Row today, Ad. We're not getting into all of them, but, chewing off a little bit of a time. But there's one little niblet also. Spire Motorsports is out there as well with Corey LaJoie and Ty Dillon. That, yes, the other Dillon grandson is moving from the 42 to that other Spire car taking over for Landon Castle. And Ad, we won't spend too much time on here, but everyone always likes to make Corey LaJoie as kind of that dark horse, the low-funded charter team. Next gen car was supposed to even everything up, and he still didn't finish in the top 30 last year, and had that magic moment at Atlanta. But other than that, what are your thoughts on Spire moving forward this year?
You're going to learn a lot about how serious they are in competing this year, because, like you said, with the next gen car, things were supposed to even up. I think Corey LaJoie, he made strides last year. I think there was times where he was racing towards the front, and then something would happen towards the end of the race. Finish wouldn't be necessarily where he would expect or want to be. But moving forward, I just think it would be, if you're Spire, it's just time to, you're on the line. You're very much on the line of, are we going to consistently be a joke team that runs towards the bottom, or are we maybe going to sneak into that place where, we'll talk about Front Row, that Front Row's kind of snuck into, where, yeah, they don't necessarily win every week, but they're at least competitive and they make you think that they've got a shot. And they probably do every now and again. We saw it last year at Watkins Glen. So it'll just be interesting to see what Spire does moving forward. I think Ty Dillon is a little bit more of a lateral move than anyone cares to admit. But I don't know. I'm not willing to sell the farm on Corey LaJoie yet. I think he came up racing with a lot of the talent that are household names in NASCAR. So I'm not going to throw him away quite yet. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to see if they can't continue to build, but this will definitely be kind of a put up or shut up year for Spire, in my opinion.
No, I like the way you put that, where especially you compare it with Front Row, where, like you said, not a top team, not funded very well, but, an alliance team there with Ford. But they are, competitive. There's no reason that a team like Spire shouldn't be competitive at super speedways. And, you've got a guy like Corey LaJoie who's a pretty good plate track racer. Obviously, you saw him competitive at Atlanta. But you don't see those two cars really running toward the front at Daytona and Talladega like some of the other teams that, when the field is kind of, narrowed and, even, a team like Spire should be up there with a team like Front Row. So that's a really good comparison. And we might as well, since you've mentioned it, we'll jump into the first of the four teams we're breaking into today, Ad. And, Front Row Motorsports, kind of, I'd say probably the third, maybe fourth team in development for Ford there. But, Michael McDowell, Todd Gillen back. This is the second year of that pairing. Daytona 500 winner Michael McDowell. Don't you forget, folks. Do not forget. That Loves 34 was in the victory lane at Daytona Beach. But Ad, no rookie stride for Todd Gillen this year. What are your thoughts on this team with Todd and Michael?
I'm going to be honest with you, Bob, and this is going to be kind of a weird thing to say, but I love this team. I think Michael McDowell, the grizzled vet, a guy who's been around the sport for so long, has won races, has definitely lost his fair share of races, and has everything happen in between. So who better to kind of bring Todd Gilliland along than Michael McDowell? I think it's a really good pairing. It's kind of like, the other sport we cover. It's like you get your starting quarterback and you're able to draft a guy and kind of bring him along in that way so you can kind of pass the torch. And not to say that that's what's going to happen here, but like I said, even though they're not winning races consistently, you at least feel like they're competitive, and you at least feel like they're showing up to the track to at least win, to try and win. And they qualify well. But then obviously things will happen during the race that, it's with stage racing and all sorts of things. You kind of have to pick and choose your spots. And there's all, I think the stage format kind of does a team like Front Row dirty, but we can get into that in another podcast. But I think, as far as what do I think of this team, to get back before I go too far on a tangent, I like them. I think it's a good pairing. I think the expectations are realistic. And yeah, they may not win every race, but at least they're competitive.
No, I like the way you put that. The next gen car is supposed to make teams like Front Row more competitive, and Michael McDowell, the 2021 winner of the Daytona 500, it feels like it was just yesterday, but I had to look at the date here, Ad. Uh, he won and he was a playoff driver in 21, didn't make the playoffs in 22, but you look at his season last year, he was better consistently. Obviously, that Watkins Glen race that you mentioned earlier really comes to mind, where he was racing for the lead there in the first stage with Chase Elliott. This is a guy that, a sneaky driver, underrated, but decent road course, great plate track racer. There's no reason that he shouldn't be a, 20, 21 at worst in the playoff standings. We'll say, notable loss. He lost his crew chief. He lost Blake Harris, who I believe went to Alex Bowman, his crew box for Hendrick. So, losing a guy that he's been with for the last few years has really helped him get some success. Going to be interesting to see if Travis Peterson can replicate that. And on the other side, for Todd Gilliland, this is the first time that the 38 car has had a driver in the same seat back-to-back years in, I think, 5-6 years. I mean, they've been kind of rotating, playing musical chairs in that car. So having a guy that's not just a rookie, maybe, can make a step forward. You saw Todd Gilliland make some steps, the road course in Indy, I remember, top 5 finish. He's shown some flashes. He was racing, I believe, I'm trying to remember which one of the races it was last year. I think it was the Roval. He was a top 5 racer before his engine blew out. Yeah. I mean, there was a race where he was consistently running in the top 5, and he led, I think, 25 laps. There's a chance where they can develop that into something there. So I'm not going to make this out to where they're going to be competing with SHR and Penske for the flagships of the Ford, but I think there is something to build on for Front Row moving forward.
And the thing that I was just going to mention is no stages at road courses this year. I don't think they're doing They're not going to be stage racing at road courses this year. One of the rule changes that we've got. Almost forgot about.
Has this been confirmed? Has that been confirmed?
Almost positive. That's what I was going to say. I'm pretty sure it has been. Obviously, if you're looking for accuracy, go somewhere else. But I mean, I hope that there's not any. If there's no stage racing at road courses, this is a dark horse team to bet on. Because this would be a team that shows up to road courses consistently. Their strategy always seems to be very good. At least gets them stage points in 1, if not 2 of the stages. So be very interesting to see if they end up going no stages at road courses this year, Bob. Take a look at that.
And the other thing, just to wrap up on Front Row here, obviously they've got Zane Smith, who won the 2023 Trucks Champion. He's been in the Futures deal with them, so he's going to be running, I believe, that Beard 62 car in the Daytona 500. But they had plans on him running, I think, 4 or 5 races under the third car with Front Row, and he's a very highly touted driver in the development series. The fact that he is with them in the pipeline for Ford, that's a huge win for them. Whether they can get money for him down the line here or put him in a seat, that's a guy that you can build around too with Zane Smith. So I'm very curious to see what his development looks like and which races they put him in. But obviously having a Truck Series champion waiting in the wings is also nice to have.
No, 100%, Bob. I mean, there's plenty of teams that moving forward, maybe one that's looking, I don't know, Bob, maybe to not necessarily get younger, but just a team that's looking to get a little bit more stable. And I think this year will do a lot for them. It's RFK Racing, Bob. It's Brad Keselowski. It's Christopher Buescher. A lot of moving parts for Brad Keselowski, it's felt like. Kind of had to juggle a lot of balls, put a lot of balls in the air to kind of, the whole driver, owner, everything that he's got going on. I just think it had to be a weird thing for him last year to not win a race and to have Chris Buescher be so successful and to kind of really carry that team. I think obviously as an owner, he's happy, but as a driver, you got to wonder what that does to the psyche. So I'm looking for a big bounce back year from Brad Keselowski. I think he looks and seems to be a lot more settled into his new role as a driver and an owner. I think we don't necessarily give the guys who do that enough credit. Obviously, Denny Hamlin at 23-11 and Jimmy Johnson, who we'll talk about in just a little bit here. But the driver owner position is difficult because you have not only to worry about yourself, but you're constantly worried about the team around you. And on top of that, the operation that the team kind of sits on. You have to know everything about that to be in that type of business. So I think as Brad gets more comfortable doing that, it'll be interesting to see if his performance on the track improves this year. But Chris Buescher had a hell of a year last year. It'll be interesting to see if the momentum keeps up, Bob.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I won't kind of. You kind of hit the nail on the head there with Brad Keselowski. I won't reiterate too much of it, but like you said, there's a lot to take in with the ownership role there, and I think you saw him take a step back there on his performance on the track, maybe to, kind of focus more of the assets on the whole. Because when you look at Roush before Brad Keselowski got there, I mean, they haven't been competitive in 5, 6, 7 years. They wasted the last years of Greg Biffle with Matt Kenseth there. It felt like a team that, when you look at the early 2000s with, the 5 different teams, the Carl Edwards, the Matt Kenseths, the Greg Biffles, that team was a powerhouse with, Jeff Burton even. And it felt like Roush never really developed with the times there. And they're kind of still stuck in that early 2000s. And Brad Keselowski knows that this is a big project there. And you saw them take steps as the season goes on. I remember Chris Buescher, I think it was second in Sonoma when he was racing Daniel Suarez most of the race. You thought, oh, wow, he's not really a road course guy. This is, kind of out of nowhere for RFK. And then, Buescher then wins he wins Bristol in the fall race. Massive race, one of the biggest non-crown jewel races in NASCAR. And, to not be a playoff driver and have that speed to win Bristol, I mean, that just shows the steps that they've taken even in 1 year with, the new fresh blood in there to be competitive from a team that, again, like I said, was pretty much outdated and dinosaurish. That's a huge step forward, and I'm very curious to see what it looks like this year now that Brad has had that year to kind of see what it's like to have both hats in the ring. And Chris Buescher also with a decent car as well.
100%. And it's one of those things that culture takes time. And I think, it hasn't been hidden that when Brad Keselowski got there, he felt like it was a place that maybe was a little bit neglected, maybe didn't have the a little bit of the TLC that a race team needs in order to be successful. But I just think when you've got the talent like a guy with Chris Buescher and the resources with Brad coming in and kind of building the culture, and I think that's why you saw them win races last year, was because the culture built pretty quickly. I think a lot quicker than anybody at RFK ever really would have thought. Because I don't think they expected to win the amount of races they did last year. And, it's not like Buescher wasn't necessarily competitive in the playoffs. He did a good job. He drove well. I just think as the season goes on, I'm just so interested to see if Brad Keselowski can't get back to old form, or if maybe it's time for him to go into a more permanent owner's role. I don't know. Maybe that's the question we get answered this year, Bob. But should be an interesting one for RFK.
One more question about RFK, and then we'll move on to some more ownership roles here, Ad. But I have one question for you. Chris Buescher had 1 win last year and 1 flip. Does he match either of those totals next year?
Oh, I think they're so worried about these cars coming off the ground that if they didn't do enough to get downforce onto these cars to keep them from flipping last year, I'm gonna take he'll get a win this year. I think that's a driver who will get a win. Out of all the teams that we've talked about, that's the first win that I feel very comfortable guaranteeing. I do think RFK will get a win this year. Be very interesting to see if that's Brad Keselowski or Chris Buescher. But I will take Chris Buescher over wins +1. Let's see it. Book it.
All right. Well, we'll keep him in the win column and not in the air. Then we'll stick to some good vibes for Chris. And we talked about Brad Keselowski and the new ownership Ad. Another driver that, we've seen a former champion put his name in the ring. And, if you blinked last year and you saw Petty GMS, no, you didn't. It is now Legacy Motor Club. Richard Petty, the Gallagher Motorsports Group, and now Jimmy Johnson have aligned into a beautiful little cohesive group. And Legacy's got a 2-car system again here. And, Ty Dillon out. We talked about him at Spire. They kind of cut him after a 1-year deal. And was kind of shocked to see that, but when you see what's moving forward, they've got Eric Jones, who obviously won the Southern 500 last year. Great story, showing a lot of speed after being kicked out of Joe Gibbs, kind of pushed out, I guess I should say, for Christopher Bell. And then you've got Noah Gragson coming in. I am very, very, very interested to see that dynamic as a rookie in the 42 car, a guy with a huge personality, a fan favorite. Legacy Motor Club is kind of one of the more intriguing teams, I think, next year. What do you think here?
This team feels like a sitcom, Bob, because you got Eric Jones, who's kind of like that guy who's been kicked around a little bit, kind of, really has had to fight for everything, but mostly a quiet guy, kind of keeps to himself. And then you got Noah Gragson, who won't drink beer, throws up if he's got a chug after he wins for, I believe it was, what month was it that he dominated last year? I think it may have been September or October, one of them, one of the two. He just didn't
Something
lose.
like that. I identify with that, Noah, by the way. I feel you there.
No, oh God, we're not touching that. But it just gets to a point where you see two guys, it looks like America's Odd Couple, and then you look at the ownership level, and you got the King and Jimmy Johnson. I mean, the whole thing. It's a reality show in the making over there at Legacy Motor Club. I wish they would have picked a better name. I still think that Petty Johnson would have been hilarious, but who am I? I'm just excited to see Jimmy Johnson back in NASCAR, to be honest with you. It feels like a homecoming, feels nostalgic, feels like my childhood a little bit, with Kurt Busch retiring and, Kevin Harvick getting out of the game. It's good that we're taking, a few steps backwards, but at least we got Jimmy Johnson back in the sport. So feels good. As far as expectations for this year, Bob, I don't know. I would like to think that Jimmy Johnson's winning pedigree makes a difference, but be interested to see if it takes a year or two to feel that difference. Because, I mean, obviously, Eric Jones winning the Southern 500 last year is a huge step for them. I mean, just to get them back into victory lane, period. Be interested to see if they can take that win and either turn it into multiple wins this year, because I think they've definitely got the talent behind the cars to do it as far as the drivers go. Be interested to see if they've got the equipment to do it, though.
Yep, absolutely. You look at Jimmy Johnson running 5 races in the 84 car. Already got the Carvana livery out for the Daytona 500. So, former 500 winner there. He's going to be competitive. Anytime you have somebody with 7 championships, especially in this era, that expertise, that knowledge is invaluable, even with a new car. It doesn't matter. That guy's seen a thing or two. He's been around for a while. You look at Eric Jones as well. Go ahead.
I mean, can't you see it at the Daytona 500? A line of Jimmy Johnson, Eric Jones, and Noah Gragson just ripping around Daytona. I just see it in my head right now, and it's just hilarious because it's almost like you've got a dad and his 2 kids right behind him, pushing him. I don't know what it's going to look like, but seems like it's going to be hilarious.
You look at that team, Eric Jones obviously made a huge stride last year. I think he, being the face of that team, Ty Dillon, he just completely blew out of the water as his teammate there. So it's hard to gauge how good Eric Jones performed in that car versus how good it actually is. But, very competitive, especially to start the year. A couple of chances where he had decent runs at Fontana, Vegas. A lot of tracks that, the Petty Johnson team that I'm going to start calling it just because of you, Ad. They historically have not had speed at the last 5-10 years. They, showed improvements. And, I talked about that, RCR Trackhouse engine. I think that was a big part of it, that development. And I only think it's going to get better as the new car goes. And having somebody like Jimmy Johnson, like I said, 5 races, it doesn't matter. He had offers from Trackhouse. He had offers from Hendrick Motorsports to own just the 48 outright. He chose to be aligned with Petty GMS. And that speaks values moving forward, that they have plans to win and not just, put his name on the car and it's just going to be money. They have plans to develop that car into a championship team, and I think that's something to watch.
Yeah, there's so much NASCAR pedigree in that garage that I don't have the testicular fortitude, we'll call it, to bet against them. I mean, there's more NASCAR championships in that garage right now than just about any room that you could possibly sit in. So it just seems like if there's going to be 2 guys who know how to win races, who know how to build successful cultures, and it just feels like it's Richard Petty and Jimmy Johnson. So I'm just so excited. It just feels like that shot in the arm that the sport needed to get Jimmy Johnson back. You needed another, that household name back to kind of bring fans that maybe have taken a hiatus or something like that back. I don't know. I think there's a lot of exciting things around this team this year, Bob. It's just interesting to see what they'll do moving forward, how successful they'll actually be.
And Eric Jones on a contract year, obviously I would like to see him extended. I wouldn't be shocked if a couple teams made a few runs at him, depending on where the dominoes fall in the openings next year. But, that's definitely something to watch, because he is definitely the A driver there. Noah Gragson's going to have to learn from. Eric Jones is, had a couple of different rides in the Cup Series. So he's got some, expertise and a great guy to learn from. But, that's a team that I think we're going to be interested, when halfway through the season to see the development they've taken, I think, from last year with a big leap. And another team the last team in our kind of preview tonight, Matt Kaulig, the rain gutter, the leaf guard man himself, went racing and, opened Kaulig Racing, and 2 charters, 2 full-time drivers this year, not just one. Justin Haley is back, and they're filling the other seat, not just, having it rotating in and out. It's the Dinger. The Dinger is back. The Dinger is here full-time to race in Cup, and damn it, I'm happy. I've got a lot to say about Kaulig, a couple of takes, but this is our podcast, not mine, so go ahead. I want to hear what you think here first.
Look at you, very generous. I take the ball and run with it on this podcast. I don't apologize for my rant.
A selfless lover.
Not touching that. Anyway, Bob, Kaulig Racing, it goes to show you what this sport looks like when it is well funded. Because Matt Kaulig has done just about everything as far as funding goes in order to field a successful race team, and they've gotten pretty close. I would say that they are the one team right now in NASCAR that, oddly enough, it feels like it's a little bit more of a driver issue than it is a machine issue. I think getting AJ Allmendinger in there permanently is going to help. One of the more dominant road course racers alive right now. So anytime you go to a road course race with AJ Allmendinger, I think you've got a chance. He didn't have power steering at one of the races last year, and he still was hanging in the top 10. So I'm never going to bet against him to kind of sneak one out at a road course. But Justin Haley, I don't know, not a name that excited me a few years ago, but the luster kind of feels like it's wearing off. Another guy who kind of feels like this is a make or break year. This is a year where he's kind of got to show everybody where he's at, whether he's going to fall kind of into the pit of despair of having to look for a ride and kind of sit in the backup seat and stuff like that, or is he going to rise and kind of keep the seat full time and keep it going? But I'm anxious to see what Kaulig's got this year, because I know it's a well-funded operation. I know they're trying to build a culture. Be interesting to see how big of a step they can take, especially because, it's supposed to be price neutral here, Bob. So anyway, that's my Kaulig rant. I'm interested to hear yours, my friend. So the floor is yours.
Well, I just want to be very clear. This is not endorsed at all by Matt Kaulig or the Leaf Guard companies here. This podcast is very neutral and independent here, but I would like to go ahead and say I am big on Kaulig Racing this year, just because of the fact you add AJ Allmendinger, one of the best drivers in the world, if you really look at it. I mean, the guy on a road course, no matter what you put him in, he's going to be, if not winning, top 5, top 10. There's no way in hell this guy is not going to win a road course this year. I'll say it. I think that Kaulig is going to get a car in the playoffs. I really do. I'm not going to say that they're going to be this year's Trackhouse and get both in, or they win multiple races here, there, everywhere. But I think that they're going to take the next step. You looked at last year with Justin Haley, and then they had the other car that kind of was rotated in and out. You have 2 charters, but you only are using one. They didn't really know what to do with it there. Getting someone like AJ Allmendinger in there is so much great experience, and then you add Justin Haley, who obviously he's won a Daytona summer race back in, I think, 2018, 2019. You looked at him last year, on the surface, not a great year. But if you look at it, how he ended the year, the last, let's give it 8-10 weeks, maybe the last 3 months here of the season, actually was pretty consistent. He was actually one of the better drivers. If you rank the points of just those last 10 to 15 races, I think he would have made the playoffs, actually. He was a top 15, 20 driver. Finished 20th in the points there, 4 top 10s. I'm not going to say he's going to be out there a championship threat, but I wouldn't be shocked if he was out there contending for, backdooring his way into the points when it comes down to the last Daytona race there. And, obviously with AJ Allmendinger, that experience, it just seems like a recipe that Kaulig is going to take a step forward this year. Like I said, maybe not Trackhouse level, but I do like this team moving forward there. And just anytime you add AJ Allmendinger, man, it's hard to say no there.
No, I agree 100%. I think it's fair. I love that you're kind of hedging the Trackhouse thing and saying I don't think that's going to happen because I mean, how could you ever think that success is going to get repeated? But who knows, Bob?
So hard to formulate even somewhat success. The fact that Trackhouse did what they did last year is incredible. I don't even know if Trackhouse can do what they did last year.
No, all the stars aligned. Everything went right for them. Bob, I think that just about wraps it up for the season preview to this point. Kind of covered a lot of bases here. Some of the smaller teams, things like that. Any final thoughts? Anything that you wanted to get out before we let the people go here?
No, this is obviously year 2 of the next gen car, so the costs are that's supposedly what evens the playing field here. But with a year of development now, you're going to see teams that find a way to bridge that gap, and maybe one of these teams is one of those teams that finds a 10th here or there everywhere, and who knows, Ad? We could be in a world where Kaulig Racing or RFK Racing or maybe Legacy. No, probably not. But maybe some of these teams are competing for the chase.
Yeah. I mean, I'm willing to say that some of the team maybe. All right, let's say this, Bob. Of the teams that we talked about today, how many would you say have a realistic shot at making the playoffs this year, at having a driver make the playoffs?
That's a really good question.
A legitimate shot. I think
you go Kaulig immediately just because of Allmendinger on road courses. I think that comes 100%. To mind immediately.
Yep.
And then the other one, I think Legacy just because of Eric Jones's experience. And he showed that he had speed last year. I wouldn't be shocked if Eric Jones took a step this year and is a top 15 driver.
Yeah. I could see it, but I mean, then obviously, how do we leave RFK off this list? Because I mean, obviously, I think
it's just too many cooks in the Ford kitchen.
Do you really? I don't know, man. Chris Buescher, I mean, he drove the wheels off of that car last year. I can't see him not carrying the momentum over. That's what I'll say about that. But I mean, I don't know. It feels like we've got high hopes for everybody right now because obviously it's the preseason. But I'm just so curious to see in the world of the next gen car, like you said, we're moving forward and obviously it's even, as the kids will say. But as my dad always told me, there's only 2 fairs in your life, and one of them's in LA County in the summer, and the other one's in Orange County, and it's a little bit later usually. So there is no fair. These people people cheat in NASCAR. They will find ways to get advantages. We have poured money into this. Once again, the greatest thing about this, Bob, is we have no idea what changes they may or may not have made to make this car safer. We don't know yet, and I'm sure we'll hear a lot more going towards the Clash, but we'll be here to break it down with you in the same way we always do. Bob, do you want to give the people a little bit of a tease? Who are we talking about next week? Who are we talking about?
Yeah, I know we had kind of talked. I think we've got 2311 RCR Trackhouse and SHR. I believe made the cut there, possibly
SHR
3 to 4 potentially, but we've got a breakdown. Look for that on the YouTube on Thursday night. We'll be dropping that, and we'll be kind of shifting more of the NASCAR content to YouTube, I think, Ad, just because that is our content place for NASCAR. It just feels like home. So our beautiful faces will be talking NASCAR primarily on YouTube as well, but we'll be loading these onto Spotify for you as well.
Yeah, no, just excited to kind of, as we inch towards the Clash, it's one of these things, living in the greater LA area, the commercials have been ever present. The billboards are everywhere. It's getting exciting around here, Bob. I'm just anxious to see how the event goes. Obviously being there last year, ton of fun, but we're here to bring you all the information you need to get ready for NASCAR season. And we'll be here all season.
It's fun talking off season and silly season, but Ad, I'm ready to talk about cars on tracks. I'm there. It's been long enough. Even a short off season like NASCAR, it's long enough.
Yeah, one of those things where you don't have to wait long, but for some people it's longer than others. So, and that is what she said. And with that, good morrow, ladies and gentlemen. This has been episode 37 of the Breaking Balls podcast.